What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Political Soul Food. About to get down today. Our topic is America ready for pluralism? Is America ready for pluralism? This question is inspired by an article in The Atlantic called These Are the Americans Who Live in a Bubble by Emma Green. So we're going to talk about that today. Get ready to call in. The number is 202-505-0250. 202-505-0250. I want to take a quick break and we're going to get down to business tonight. All right. Good to see y'all. Okay. Okay. Is America ready for pluralism? Do you think America is ready for pluralism? I guess it depends on who you are. I'm sure some people might say yes, the few. Some might say no, maybe more than the few. And perhaps even more than that, some might be saying, no, crap, we don't want no pluralism. Are you crazy? So, depends on who you are, right? And that's how you're going to answer this question. But let me just reflect on this issue here. I think it's an important issue to think about in terms of the how 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 Americans view their country and whether or not pluralism plays a role in that. I think it does. I think the very battle that we are experiencing in politics now between Trump and his crew and those who vote against Trump and his crew. And I think, this is a question that's going to be at the heart of American politics for the next 50 years and probably beyond that. But I do see one of the teams picking up speed. So what do you mean by that, Kassan? Some of you might ask. Well, let's just check out this article. Right? So this article is called These Are the Americans Who Live in a Bubble. A significant minority seldom or never met people from another race, and they prize sameness, not difference. This piece is in the Atlantic. This piece is in the Atlantic. For those of you who just chimed in, please post this in. The question for tonight is America ready for pluralism? And this is inspired by this article that I read in the Atlantic called These Are the Americans Who Live in a Bubble. And so, let me give you like a generic definition of pluralism here. It's one just straightforward I got from a Google search. A condition or system in which two or more states, groups, or principles, sources of authority, etc., coexist. So, in other words, pluralism is about diversity, people with different religions, people from different ethnicities, from different cultures, all living together. And you can get a little deeper than that, but at the end of the day, like that's I think is a good working definition. All right, so it's sort of like tolerance, and for some, it's a little bit more than tolerance. It's not just saying, okay, you guys stay over there and we stay over here. All right, we're not talking about separation in that sense. We're talking about, in fact, an appreciation or understanding or respect for other ways of living. And so the question is, do you think America is ready for it? And the reason why I'm asking this question is more for me to explore because, we have so many women, so many people of color, people of different sexualities beginning to represent our country. And obviously, we still have a long way to go. Older white men basically are the majority in Congress, are the majority of people in power and in politics. But just because that's the status quo right now doesn't mean that there aren't any trends that we should observe. And I do observe some trends. And one trend is that people of color, women, everybody else who do not fit in the sort of Anglo-Saxon Protestant Christian framework, okay, and let me add around all of that, whiteness. So, with that said, with these kinds of trends, does that mean America is ready for pluralism? Does that mean America is ready for pluralism? Let me explore this article here with you all, and I'll sort of go back and forth with this article, and I think it'll be a great reference point because this article is based on some research that was done, and yeah, and I think it's worth being aware of some of this research. So it was a poll done to examine Americans and to see how they feel about other people who are different. Let me give some shout outs real fast. Shout outs to GD Stokes up in the house and Dr. Marshall up in the house here on IG. So I read this first paragraph. It's interesting. Most Americans do not live in a totalizing bubble. They regularly encounter people of different races, ideologies, and religions. For the most part, they view these interactions as positive or at least neutral. But there's a problem. There's a significant minority who don't live that way, who see things very differently. And this is what the writer, Emma Green, a staff writer for The Atlantic, is putting out here. She did some research, looked at some polls, talked to a few experts on the matter to get some information about how people view themselves, about how Americans understand themselves as members of communities. So there's a big problem. So the problem is that, hey, there's a significant minority which has a lot of pull. This minority has a lot of pull in society. And basically, they do not look favorably at diversity. Now, the article kind of asks the question, is it necessarily their fault? Is it the fault of the people who don't engage in other cultures or religions or people from different ideologies? Is it their fault? Could it be education or geography? Should we look at that? But the article does suggest that some of the separation is perpetuated as well. So these are some questions here, and there's some points that I kind of disagree with a little bit. So I'll get to that. Feel free to say what you feel about this as well. So we got this problem. The problem that is brought to our attention is that there's a significant minority of Americans who do not live in a diverse sort of community. Now, what's interesting about that is that minority is part of a larger group that do reinforce certain differences, even if the particular group I'm speaking about doesn't live in isolated communities. All right, and so maybe I hash that out a little bit later. So let me just read this first, this next paragraph here. Yet, according to a new study by the Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI, and The Atlantic, a significant minority of Americans do not live this way. They seldom or never meet people of another race. They dislike interacting with people who don't share their political beliefs. And when they imagine the life they want for their children, they prize sameness, not difference. Education and geography seem to make a big difference in how people think about these issues, and in some cases, so did age. Interesting. Education and geography. Now, this is interesting. I mean, for those of you who may got into philosophy in the past, Plato, for example, had this notion that if the more people knew, if they were truly wise, then they would be good, right? And so this, it seems that the argument here is that, well, education and geography is the deciding factor. That if people were more educated, then they probably would be down for diversity. They'd be willing to engage people of other races. Probably wouldn't have racism at all if we just had better education. And then also geography seems to be an issue. It's not certain people's fault that they don't like others. It's just where they live and where they kind of grew up. That's an argument that I think is valid for certain groups of people. But this country was built with the intention of segregating certain people based on race, based on wealth, or the lack of, and based on gender. It's a part of this country's legacy, and it's part of this country's history. So in that way, I don't really buy that argument, because the very education and geography that's supposed to be responsible as a culprit was actually created, was constructed to serve that purpose. So perhaps in a certain way, I can argue against myself that education and geography are the factors that are creating, the factories that are creating sort of this monolithic culture and this animosity towards other groups. But these factories, these cultural factories, I would call them, were actually created and actually invested in and renovated and rebuilt decade after decade after decade. So we just can't leave it to these institutions or these circumstances. There's an intentionality, I would say, to the author of this piece here. And so, but there's some good information here. The divide, probably the biggest divide, it seems, not probably, according to even this research here in this article, I think we will agree on this one, is political. And it is very visible. It was visible in the 2016 election. And you have those, and here's how it's visible in the campaign slogans. Let's think about this. Let's make America great again. I mean, just trying to be fair. I'm not throwing any sarcasm. I'm not trying to be facetious. Make America great again is telling us that America was great and we kind of moved away, and so we need to get back to that time and place where America was doing pretty well, right? And Hillary's slogan was stronger together. Everybody, we should come together, and also moving forward. There is a duality here, okay? And so in that way, I see the divide, where people who are passionate about Trump, okay, let me pretend he's not racist or hasn't really been a proponent for racism and fascism and all that stuff. Leave that out. Just look at this divide based on the rhetoric alone. You have a group who say we need to make America great again. And you have another group that is saying we need to continue to move forward to make this country great in a way that it hasn't been, to fulfill the work that has been set out for this country. So both are looking towards a scenario where America is great, but they're located in different dimensions. they are understood with different imaginations. One has a sort of nostalgia for a past time, this Edenic period of America, and the other one is more messianic in a sense, where America has a purpose, teleology. We need to strive to get there, and we got to do that together. And so, on that grounds, on the just, I'm trying to make it very neutral in terms of just people wanting a basic society without any grudge against someone else. These views, there's some different views here, and that's something that we have to acknowledge. Now, we can't just stop there. So we have the diversity versus something going on in the past. I would argue that the vision of the past goes back towards a more monolithic kind of culture, because diversity has the diversity we see now, particularly in our representation and just in the playground of American societies, it has come about by struggle, has come about by effort. We can see the branches of different communities growing now. We can see the leaves on these different branches of these various colors of ethnicity, race, sexuality, gender, religion, and on and on and on. Right? That was brought about by effort. But as the longer I go into this, I can't ignore race, and race plays a big part, in this divide. Obviously, because people who are living in certain communities, as this article lets us know, that geography is a big point, and what the article does say, and I agree with. I mean, it's the fact that people in a particular geography would tend to be of a particular religion, ideology, and of course ethnicity and race, and so that plays a huge part of it. So let me just bring up some other points. Political identity. So this goes back to something I keep talking about over and over, is political identity, and I always frame it as, what does it mean to be an American? And I think that this is sort of the battle right now, the clash of ideologies about American identity. And so political identity is influenced by, again, I was going to say influenced by geography and culture. So the article, the writer here, Emma Green, would argue that geography and culture is playing a big role. But I kind of see that differently. I think it's dictated by ideology. I think that ideology created much of the geographies and the cultures that we see. But at the same time, I think we probably agree on the effect. And let me read what she says. In terms of both geography and culture, America is largely sorted by political identity. So yeah, on the surface, that's true. When you go to certain regions in our country, you will encounter certain groups of people in certain pockets. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But these pockets, these enclaves, were carved out. People went to these spaces and kept others out, or went to certain spaces that were already occupied and pushed people out. So that's something to think about. Now let me just fast forward on to some other things here. Let's look at some numbers and some factors that are going on here that I find very interesting, particularly as an advocate for education. So let me bring something in on that note. So, something that caught me by surprise was that she says Black and Hispanic people were more likely than whites to describe their lives this way, although education made a big difference among whites. 27% of non-college educated whites said they seldom or never encounter people from a different political party, compared with just 6% of college educated whites. This is interesting. There's a lot of things going on in here. So first of all, so you have Black and Hispanic people who are more likely to describe their lives as being sort of isolated, or not, their lives don't encounter people from other races, more or less. And I think that's an issue of racism or segregation, right? That scenario, that circumstance was placed on African Americans and Hispanics. Okay, they were sort of put in places, and for the most part, were not allowed to move into other places. And this was very visible when African Americans and Hispanics tried to move into other areas of American society. In the history of the great migrations, I think events is the realities that people were living in. I mean, people were trying to escape from communities where they were terrorized to get to places where they could find, a little space to carve out a meaningful life with family and friends. And then entering new spaces in the north or the east, that also led to conflict and hostility, where while things may be better to a certain degree, people were still forced in pockets, and we can see that in the creation and the construction of certain ghettos and communities. Right, there's a lot of violence and terrorism going on in cities such as Detroit or Chicago, New York, and all around the northern eastern cities. So we can see that for Black and Hispanic people, my argument is that the effects of that created the scenario that they're in now, where they're living in communities that they were almost practically forced into, either because they didn't want it to be beat up, or it was the only place that they can afford or allowed to live. All right, and in many cases, African Americans and Hispanics are forced to move when the dominant society decides. And so we can see that when gentrification happens, and especially in Harlem now, a lot of people got to pack up and go, and they're going to go find other communities, and new groups of people are going to come. So my argument here is that my argument is against this article is that it gives the impression that Black and Hispanic people, when describing their lives this way as being one that doesn't encounter other people, as if that was like by choice, and that's not by choice in their case. It's not by choice, right? There's just political moves made to create that reality. All right. Now, moving on to the other half of that, trying to unpack this a little bit more, it is interesting that non-college educated whites, the more non-college educated whites don't encounter other groups, and just 6% of college educated whites do. But that is also selling this dream, which I believe in to a certain degree, that, oh, well, if we just educated more people, right? If it's true that only 6% of college educated whites are just kind of living isolated lives, then the more education, the better. And yes, that's true. But even still, like if we look at the exit polls of those who voted for Trump, I mean, Trump did well among whites who were educated and non-educated. All right, so there's some issues here. So it's not just ideology. It's not just geography. It's ideology. So let me probably don't have time to unpack all of this stuff here, but this is an article that I was reading that I recommend. There's a lot of juicy stuff, and as you can see, maybe I should email the author. We can have a little talk. Let's see. But for the most part, is America ready for pluralism? I think some Americans are not ready for pluralism, and I think many more Americans are ready for pluralism. And so if we were to take the majority as the representatives of America's mind and wishes, then America is becoming more and more ready for pluralism. I think that is happening. It is happening in the sense that looking at people who are beginning to run for office, who are pretty much representations of many more people who are supporting them and enabling them to take on that responsibility and that great mission and purpose, that tells us that Americans are looking for change. And if the change that we see now consists of diversity and ethnicity and religion and sexuality and economic status, then we are looking at signs of pluralism in this country. And so I guess this was another show to motivate you all to stay on the fort, stay positive for good reason, data, for good reason, not just wishful thinking. I'm not saying get a wishbone, close your eyes, break it, and and hope that when you wake up the next morning, you're going to see an amazing American society full of diversity. No, what it is saying, what I am saying here is that we do have some issues, right? Geography is an issue, education is an issue, and these issues bring about divisions along different fault lines. Religion is one, right? We there are things that we can do, right? If we look at the trends, there are things that we can do. So if geography is an issue, then we can understand how to engage geography, moving into certain communities, or pushing for policy that opens up the doors to certain communities. In terms of education, pushing for policies that provide education in society and communities where it's lacking. Also, in terms of the curriculum, right? Designing curriculum that expose people who live in a particular area with that is very inclusive, very exclusive, just for the fact of the geography. So then perhaps we could talk about what education in America should look like, or should look like the people who compose the United States of America. So regardless where you are in this country, then perhaps the education still should reflect the fact that all around the country you have all these different values that make up the United States of America, the American mind. So, this is how we translate that, right, into something tangible, particularly in politics. These are my thoughts. So here's some more numbers here that I found interesting to know. Let's see here. But Americans also believe they are extremely divided along lines of identity. 77% said the country is divided over religion. 83% said it's divided over race and ethnicity. And fully 91% of respondents said the United States is divided by politics. Now, it's interesting because when people say the country is divided by politics, they tend to just blame the political machines, like the parties. It's the party's fault. And they also blame other institutions, such as the media. It's media. No, it's politics. It's ideology. It's politics. It's ideology. It's culture. It's religion. It's not the institutions. These institutions are comprised of individuals who use the institution as a tool, as an instrument. Just like individuals use lobbyists. The same way the working class wanted to use unions. So there's something about this article that is diluting the fact that we have an ideological issue here. So it's not just the ideological issues is not just here because people happen to be separated or they happen to not be as educated. And perhaps Emma Green is not making that case, but it surely smells like that. And so I think the information here is really interesting, but the sort of the examination or the reflection of the data here kind of gives a different picture. And that picture is dangerous. While I am optimistic, don't get me wrong, like I just said, I think that things are, changing. There are trends that are happening. And my optimism says that these changes are imminent. Not guaranteed, obviously. You never know what can happen, but just speaking from my angle and my desire for things to be better. So I'm just going all in with this positive mind, like a coach, right on game day, right? We know that things might not go our way, but we're going to tell the team we can do this, right? And I think we can do this, and we have good stats here showing us that we can do this. So that's one thing. So there's another. Here's another interesting stat here. Here's another interesting stat that I found. So I'm going to start from here. Americans today are sharply divided over the value of multiculturalism. In the survey, 54% of Democrats said they prefer the United States to be made up of people from a wide variety of religions, compared with 12% of Republicans. By contrast, 40% of Republicans said they'd prefer a nation mostly made up of Christians, compared with 14% of Democrats. Let me just throw this out there. I'm probably hitting under the belt, but this is a shot I'm taking. When people say the parties are the same, this data here is clapping back. No, the parties are not the same. Again, when I say the parties are not the same, I'm never saying that one party is just perfect. I'm not saying that. But I am saying the parties are not the same. And given a choice, you want to know these details. Frankly speaking, if you're not a Christian and the Republicans are able to create the kind of society they would like, hey, you're in big trouble. Likewise, if the Democrats are able to create a more pluralistic liberal society and you're a Protestant Christian fundamentalist, then you're going to, I wouldn't say you would be in trouble, actually. I think you would say you're in trouble because Democrats are not trying to non-Christians or even other Christians who are Democrats. Let's not forget that. It's almost like Democrats are not Christians. Many Democrats are Christians. They're not going to try to proselytize you. It's just that you probably will be put in scenarios where you have to respect someone else's way of prayer or interpretation of the Bible and stuff like that. And the laws will reflect that. But in terms of like, you know, physical, I mean, maybe there's some psychological torment for a person like that. But the other way leads to real terrorism, leads to real terror and torture. You're living in a society that is, let's say, whose politics would be rooted in religion in such a way where policies would be made that will punish people for not being a part of that religion or being viewed as sacrilegious because they're inconsistent with certain principles, and that's a problem. So in that way, I'm down for the democratic style, right? Because I'm like, if you want to believe in fundamentalism, then fine, go ahead. In my society, you'll be able to do that as long as you don't inflict some pain and create like arbitrary laws based on how you interpret your book and putting reason in the back. Nah, I'm not going for that. I don't know about you guys. So listen, any thoughts on this? Chime in. The number is 202-505-0250. 202-505-0250. You can chime in on this. What do you think? Do you think America is ready for pluralism? What are your thoughts? We got some questions here. Let's see here. How would it be without our Constitution? How would our country be without our Constitution? Well, it depends on what would be in its place. What would it be in its place would be a question I would ask. G.D. Stokes put that out there, always dropping some provocative, intellectually stimulating ideas out here. So, yeah, well, if we take, oh, we got a call, and I believe this is my boy Stokes up in the place to be. So let's bring him in, y'all. Y'all ready? Yo.
Hey, Kassan, how you doing?
Hey, GD Stokes. I'm well. How are you today?
All right. Are you still live?
Yeah, we still live. We running, bro.
Okay. I just want to know because sometimes it's like a delay.
Yeah. You're live. This line is the live line. Whenever I pick up, we are live.
Okay. All right. So the question tonight was, do we need pluralism or how would it be with pluralism?
Yeah. The question is, and we can expand from it, but is America ready for pluralism? Does America want pluralism?
That's an interesting question because you're looking at how that poll that you just read out about, you got a certain number of people that's saying that it's all political, and another group saying it's all religion, and another group saying it's racism, and I can say it all three. I can see each part of that as being a contributing factor to why America's not ready for pluralism.
Right.
And I mean, from growing up in the North and then moving to the South, I read about a lot of things that was in history books about how the South was with Jim Crow laws and racism, systematic racism, basically, and how tough it was for minorities, especially blacks.
Right.
And growing up in the North, which is more industrial, it wasn't so much. It was like a big melting pot up there. My friends growing up was Cambodian, Puerto Rican, and white.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
diversity.
very
Yeah.
diverse.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
So
I don't know.
geography, obviously play.
Right.
I was getting ready to say geography plays a role, but then again, these spaces were these spaces were allowed to have such diversity, right? So it's not just geography creating the multiculturalism; it's also people wanting multiculturalism,
Right.
in these places, all right? And so once we find out that, hey, this is a place where you can go and get some Cambodian cuisine along
Right.
with some yams,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? This is the place
That's
where I would
why,
move to, and that's a choice at the same
right.
time.
And that's why immigration is so important. We
Yeah,
need more immigrants coming over here, because United States was a country based off of immigrants.
right,
So,
right. Yep,
but
absolutely, absolutely. So I think for you the jury's still out, right? So you're not sure if
right,
we're really really ready given the stats.
right.
I
I mean,
mean,
as of right now, I can say no,
okay.
especially with the Trump era.
Mm,
Because even towards like second term, starting with President Obama, people were saying, "Hey, racism's gone. It's dead. There's no more of that."
mm,
People just have to lift themselves up by the bootstrap and progress and want to do the work and want to get education and want to work hard to have and stop asking for handouts.
yeah,
But
yeah,
as we can see through his politics, which is like corporate welfare right now for the top 1%,
absolutely. It's
it's the
crazy.
same thing. Those people are not, back in the Reagan days, they was called job creators. They're
Mm,
not creating jobs
mm,
or
mm, mm.
adding um, to better wages for people. You
Yeah,
know, they're just saving their money to try to divvy a spot on the Forbes list.
right, right, absolutely.
So,
That's
so that's
some good points, man. Good points.
yeah.
Well,
So
yeah, that's what I mean. This is going to be an issue that we come back to over and over on political soul food because I mean, at the end of the day, I think we know this stuff, but just to really continuously engage it and become acquainted with like the details about why we have some of the issues we have, is the next level. So that way, we're more in tune with the policies and how these policies are responding to these issues or which
right,
politicians are responding to these issues.
right.
So it's important for us to have these discussions. GD Stokes, I want to thank you once again for chiming
Oh yeah,
in.
no problem.
So I'm going to get back to the show and give some
Okay.
final remarks. We're going to be back again soon.
All
Um,
right. All right. Thanks for having me.
oh, thank you. Thanks for tuning in. Ladies and gentlemen, that
All
was
right.
GD Stokes, a freaking flyer here who comes in to drop some real life talk on politics and everything else that we get into. I want to thank you for sharing your time up in here in Political Soul Food. As y'all can see, I got the Political Soul Food cap on. Yes, yes, indeed. For those of you who want to support this, check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/Kassan Henry, as it is spelled on the platform there, whatever you are. If you're on Instagram, you see it, IG, Facebook, and YouTube, Kassan Henry. Check that out and see different ways to support this platform. But more importantly, I got to remind you, support our society any way you can. Give someone uplifting word, help someone find a way to school, whatever you can do to make this society just a bit better. That'll be a blessing and support for me in this whole mission I'm on to help this world one conversation at a time. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to call it a night. I wish you all well. If you got any ideas or topics or you want to respond to something, hit me up. You can hit me up on these platforms here. Again, the name of this article here, I got about maybe 60% down. There's still a lot more juice here that you might want to check out on your own. It's in the Atlantic. The writer is Emma Green, a staff writer for the Atlantic. She covers politics, policy, and religion. And the name of the article is "These Are the Americans Who Live in a Bubble," and that inspired me to ask the question: Is America ready for pluralism? Take that question up with yourself, and with your friends and family. Have a good night, everyone. Aji, over and out. And Facebook, thanks a lot for tuning in.